So, I've been working at this local restaurant for almost a year now. Not because I need to, but because I kind of enjoy it. Like, it's simple work. The tips are decent, and it gives me something to do 3 days a week that isn't staring at spreadsheets and contracts. Yeah, I said contracts, but more on that later. My family has always treated me like the family disappointment. Ever since high school, when my brother Jake got into that fancy prep school on a partial scholarship, and I stayed in public school, my parents mortgaged their house to pay for his education while telling me I should focus on learning a trade since college probably wasn't in the cards for me. I still remember my mom sitting me down junior year and saying that not everyone is meant for success, and that's okay. Some people are just meant to support those who are. I was 16 when she said this shit to me. Jake is 2 years older and he went to business school while I worked construction jobs to save money. My parents constantly showed off his accomplishments while acting like I didn't exist. When I finally saved enough to move out at 20, my dad said it was about time and gave me a plunger as a housewarming gift. Not even joking. Anyway, fast forward to last month. I'm working my regular Thursday lunch shift wearing my work polo and name tag when the host seats a group of 4 at one of my tables. I look up and shit, it's Jake, my parents, and some woman I don't recognize. Jake spots me first and his face does this thing where he's trying not to laugh but failing. Then he gets loud. He says something like, "Holy shit, still wearing that pathetic uniform at 28. What a fucking loser." The entire section goes quiet. I'm standing there with water pitchers in both hands while my brother is literally pointing at me, making sure his date sees me. He tells her I'm the family disappointment and they tell people I'm in prison because it's less embarrassing. My mom gets up and comes over to me, putting her hand on my arm like she's consoling me. She says this is exactly why they took down all my photos. And when friends visit, they say they only have one son. I'm not even kidding. She said this in the middle of the restaurant where I work, where I have to see these people every week. Then my dad joins in, pulling out his wallet with this look on his face like I'm a homeless guy asking for change. He pulls out some cash and tosses it onto my table, saying something like, "Here's $70, son. Maybe finally do something with your life." Then he mentions that Jake just bought his second house. Jake's date, who looks uncomfortable as hell at this point, asks if I'm special needs, and Jake laughs and says, "No, just born a failure." I just stood there. The manager was watching from the counter, clearly trying to figure out if he should intervene. My coworker, Amber, was staring with her mouth open. I could feel everyone in the restaurant looking at me. So, I did the only thing I could do. I smiled, set down the water pitchers, and told them I'd be their server today. Then I took their order like nothing happened. My dad kept making these comments throughout their meal about how I should aim higher, and maybe Jake could put in a good word at his company. Jake bragged about his BMW and his corner office while his date kept glancing at me like I was going to snap and stab someone with a fork. The crazy thing is, this is normal for them. They've been doing this shit for years. What they don't know is that after I left construction, I got my real estate license. I didn't tell them because, well, honestly, I was tired of them shitting on everything I did. I started small, flipping a couple houses with money I'd saved. Then, I partnered with this developer who needed someone hungry who understood construction. 4 years later, I owned my own real estate investment company. I bought a house in Lakeside Hills last year. All cash, no mortgage. I drive a 3-year-old Honda because I don't care about showing off, and I work at this restaurant because I like it and it keeps me grounded. After they left, 15% tip, of course, my manager Dave came over and asked if I was okay. I told him I was fine. Amber offered to key Jake's BMW, which made me laugh for the first time that day. I went home after my shift and sat on my deck overlooking the lake, and I made a decision. For years, I've kept my success quiet because I didn't want to deal with their shit. I didn't want Jake trying to network with my contacts or my parents suddenly acting proud of me after years of treating me like garbage. But being humiliated in front of an entire restaurant, that crossed a line. See, the thing is, Jake's impressive career is at a commercial real estate firm that's been trying to get in with my developer partner for months. They don't know I'm the reason they keep getting shut out. Jake's second house. It's in a development that my company is about to acquire and completely redevelop. His property value is about to either skyrocket or tank depending on what I decide. My parents' retirement fund, it's heavily invested in the same market I work in. With a few phone calls, I could seriously impact their financial future. I've always taken the high road, always kept my mouth shut when they put me down, always smiled and changed the subject when relatives asked what I was doing with my life. But after watching my father throw cash at me like I was begging for change, something snapped. So last night, I made a call to my business partner. I told him I was ready to move forward with the Lakeside acquisition, the one that includes Jake's new house. I also mentioned that I'd be attending the industry dinner next month, the one where Jake's boss has been desperately trying to make connections. 1 month from today, my family is going to learn exactly what their disappointment has been doing with his life, and I'm going to enjoy every second of it. Update coming after the industry dinner. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this plays out. Update 1. A lot of you asked for an update. So, here's what's happened in the 2 weeks since the restaurant incident. The day after my family humiliated me, my mom texted me like nothing had happened. Just a casual, "How are you doing, sweetie?" Text like she hadn't told an entire restaurant that they pretend I don't exist. I left her on read for 3 days before she followed up with, "Are you mad at us? Am I mad? Are you fucking kidding me?" I finally responded that I was busy with work. True. And would talk to her later. Lie. What I was actually doing was setting things in motion. Remember how I mentioned Jake's second house is in a development my company is acquiring? Well, I spent that weekend going through the property details with my business partner Mitch. Turns out Jake's impressive second home purchase isn't quite what he made it sound like. He's underwater on the mortgage already. Bought at the peak of the market last year and financed about 90% of it. The development has been struggling because the original developer ran out of funds, which is why my company has been considering buying it out. Mitch wanted to wait another 3 months before making an offer. Thinking prices would drop more, I convinced him to move now instead. We're not doing anything illegal or even unethical, just accelerating a business decision that makes financial sense. The fact that it's going to put my brother in a tough spot is just, let's call it a happy coincidence. I was working from home on Tuesday when my doorbell rang. Guess who? My parents. They've never been to my house before because I've always made excuses. I bought this place a year ago and they still think I rent some crappy apartment on the other side of town. I almost didn't answer, but then I thought, no, let's see where this goes. My dad's jaw literally dropped when I opened the door. He stood there staring past me at my living room with the big windows overlooking the lake. My mom tried to play it cool, asking if I was house-sitting for someone. House-sitting? I told her, no, this is my place. And invited them in. They walked around like they were in a museum, touching things and asking how much they cost. My dad kept saying things like he didn't realize restaurant work paid so well these days. Then he sat down and asked if I was dealing drugs. I'm not kidding. His first assumption wasn't that I might be successful. It was that I must be doing something illegal. That's how little they think of me. I told them I had some investments that worked out. My mom immediately asked if I could help them with their retirement account since they've been worried about it lately. Amazing how quickly I went from disappointment to potential financial advisor. My dad asked if I could loan Jake some money because he's a little cash poor right now after buying his second house. I said I'd think about it and they seemed satisfied with that. They left after about an hour and I went back to work setting up the next phase of my plan. I called my contact at Westlake Partners where Jake works and accepted their invitation to the charity dinner next week. I normally skip these industry events, but this time I made sure they put me at a table with the senior partners, including Jake's boss. That night, Jake called me for the first time in about 2 years. He started with small talk, asking how I was doing before getting to the point. He heard I have a nice place and wanted to come check it out. Then he asked if I could introduce him to any investor friends I might have since he's working on some big deals right now. I said, sure, come over Saturday morning and we can talk. He sounded shocked that I agreed so easily. Probably expected me to be still sulking over the restaurant thing. Saturday arrives and Jake pulls up in his BMW. He walks in, sees my place, and his whole demeanor changes. He's looking around, recalculating. He asks how I can afford this on a server's salary. I tell him I have other income sources. He sits down and for the next hour tries to figure out exactly what I do and who I know without directly asking. It's like watching someone try to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Finally, he mentions that his firm is trying to connect with Riverside Development Group for months with no luck. I just smile and say, yeah, I've heard they're pretty selective about who they work with. Jake gets more direct, asking if I know anyone there. I tell him I might and that I'm going to the industry charity dinner next week where several Riverside people will be. His eyes practically bugged out of his head. He immediately asked if I could get him an invitation. I said I'd see what I could do, knowing full well that Jake's boss already has an invitation. Jake was specifically not invited because he botched a presentation to one of Riverside's subsidiary companies last year. I spent the rest of the weekend finalizing the acquisition deal for Jake's troubled development. We're announcing it the day after the charity dinner, and the current homeowners don't know yet. The plan includes completely redesigning the community, which will require special assessments from all current owners to fund the improvements. Those who can't pay will have the option to sell back to us at 80 cents on the dollar. Jake can't afford either option right now. He's going to be fucked. Yesterday, my mom called asking if I'd spoken to Jake about helping him out. I said we had a good talk and I was considering some options. She was thrilled, talking about how the family needs to stick together and how she always knew I'd be successful someday. I asked her about that time when I was 16 and she told me some people aren't meant for success. She got quiet, then said I must have misunderstood her, that she always believed in me, that taking down my photos was just because they needed the wall space. I let her rewrite history. It doesn't matter anymore. Today, I confirmed my seat at the charity dinner. I'll be at table 1 with the CEO of Riverside, 2 senior partners from Westlake, Jake's bosses, and the mayor. Jake will be working the room as a junior associate, probably handing out business cards and trying to make connections. He has no idea I'm the reason his firm keeps getting shut out of the major deals in this region. He has no idea I own a controlling interest in the development where his second home is slowly turning into a financial disaster. And he has no idea that in exactly 1 week, everyone in that ballroom is going to know exactly who his loser brother really is. I'll update again after the dinner. Shit's about to get real. Update 2. Hey everyone. Back with another update. Things have been escalating fast since my last post and I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything that's happened. So, buckle up because this shit just went nuclear. The day of the charity dinner finally arrived. I spent way too long getting ready. Not going to lie, I actually went and bought a new suit for the occasion. Nothing flashy, just well-fitted and classic. I wanted to look the part without looking like I was trying too hard, you know. I got to the venue early to check the seating arrangements one last time. As expected, I was at table 1 with the industry big shots, including Jake's bosses from Westlake. What I wasn't expecting was to see my brother's name added to our table at the last minute. Apparently, one of the senior partners had brought him along as his +1. For a second, I thought about changing tables, but then I was like, nah, this is actually perfect. Let him see firsthand exactly who his loser brother really is. I grabbed a drink at the bar and waited. The ballroom started filling up with all these people in fancy clothes making small talk. I spotted Jake across the room immediately. He was working the crowd, shaking hands, handing out business cards, doing that fake laugh thing people do at these events. Then he saw me. The double take he did was priceless. Like his brain couldn't process what his eyes were seeing. He excused himself from whatever conversation he was having and made a beeline straight for me. He asked what the hell I was doing there, like I had crashed the party or something. I just smiled and said I was invited obviously. He looked at my name tag with the table number on it and literally took a step back, asked if I was someone's +1. I said, no, I was specifically invited by the organizing committee. The whole time he's looking around nervously, probably worried I was going to embarrass him somehow. I just sipped my drink and acted completely casual, which was clearly freaking him out even more. Then the announcement came for everyone to find their tables for dinner. The look on Jake's face when he realized we were sitting at the same table. I wish I had a picture. He went from confused to panicked in about 2 seconds. As we walked to the table, he grabbed my arm and hissed that I better not say anything about the restaurant incident. That these people were important to his career. I just shrugged and said I was here for business, not family drama. We get to the table and the CEO of Riverside, Tom, stands up and fucking hugs me. Calls me the man of the hour. Says they couldn't have closed the Lakeview deal without me. Jake is standing there with his mouth literally hanging open while Tom introduces me to everyone else at the table as one of the most innovative investors in the region. Jake's boss, Richard, asks if we're related since we have the same last name. Before I can answer, Jake jumps in with some shit about us being distant cousins. Distant cousins. I just looked at him and said, no, we're brothers, actually, born and raised in the same house. The awkward silence that followed was spectacular. Richard looked confused and said he thought Jake was an only child. Jake started stammering about how we're not close, haven't spoken in years, etc. I just smiled and said, yeah, we had dinner together at the restaurant where I worked part-time just a few weeks ago with our parents. Very memorable evening. Jake looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Throughout dinner, it became increasingly clear to everyone that Jake had no idea who I really was. His loser brother was actually the reason their firm couldn't get in with Riverside. I owned a significant stake in several major developments in the region. The mayor asked how long I'd been in the business. I said about 5 years, but I like to keep a low profile. Then he asked about my restaurant job, genuinely curious why someone successful would wait tables. I explained that I enjoy the work. It keeps me grounded and gives me a different perspective on the community. Jake kept trying to steer the conversation away from me, but every time he did, someone would ask me another question. By dessert, he was sweating through his shirt. After dinner, during the mingling portion, Jake cornered me by the bar. He was furious, demanded to know why I never told him about my real job. I reminded him that he never actually asked. He spent years assuming I was a failure without ever being interested enough to find out what I was really doing. Then he switched tactics, going from angry to buddy-buddy in seconds. Started talking about how we should join forces and how much we could accomplish together. How he always believed in me deep down. How this was all a big misunderstanding. I just looked at him and asked if he remembered what he said at the restaurant about telling people I was in prison because it was less embarrassing. Asked if he remembered his date, questioning if I was special needs while he laughed. He tried to play it off as a joke. Said I was being too sensitive. That family gives each other shit all the time. I told him that family doesn't humiliate each other in public. Doesn't tear each other down for years. Doesn't pretend the other doesn't exist. Then Tom from Riverside came over and asked if I'd made a decision about the Oak Ridge Heights property. That's the development where Jake's second house is. I said, yes, we're moving forward with the full redevelopment plan, and we'll be sending out the special assessment notices to current homeowners tomorrow. Jake's face went white. He asked what that meant exactly. Tom started explaining the whole plan, complete infrastructure overhaul, architectural redesign, massive homeowner assessments to fund it. Said anyone who couldn't afford the assessments would have the option to sell back to us at a significant discount. Jake pulled me aside and asked if this was some kind of joke. I told him no, it's just business. Sometimes investments don't work out the way you hope. He said he couldn't afford a special assessment right now. He was already stretched thin with the mortgage. I just shrugged and said that's unfortunate, but he could always sell the property back to us at 80 cents on the dollar. He'd take a massive loss, but it would be better than foreclosure. The look of realization on his face was exactly what I'd been waiting for. He finally understood that this wasn't a coincidence, that I knew exactly what I was doing, that his loser brother had been 10 steps ahead of him this whole time. He called me a vindictive fuck, said family shouldn't do this to each other. I just laughed and asked which one of us started this, reminded him that I was perfectly content to let him think I was a failure until he decided to humiliate me in front of an entire restaurant. He stormed off, nearly knocking over a waiter in the process. I finished my drink and made the rounds, saying goodbye to everyone. Tom mentioned that he was looking forward to our golf game next weekend. Richard from Westlake asked if I'd consider letting them in on the next Riverside deal. I said I'd think about it. The next morning, I got a call from my mom. She was crying, saying Jake had told them everything. How I was sabotaging his career and his investments, how I was deliberately trying to ruin him financially. She kept asking why I would do such a thing to my own brother. I reminded her about the restaurant, about how she told everyone they pretend to only have one son, about how they took down all my photos. She got quiet, then tried to explain that they were just embarrassed, that they didn't understand why someone with my potential would choose to work in a restaurant, that they thought I was wasting my life. I asked if that justified treating me like shit for years. She didn't have an answer for that. My dad called an hour later. He was more direct. Said we needed to have a family meeting to sort this out, that Jake was in serious financial trouble now because of what I'd done, that they might need to help him avoid foreclosure on his second home. I asked if they had the money to do that. He admitted they didn't. Their retirement fund wasn't doing well. Then he asked if I would consider backing off on the Oak Ridge development. Maybe find a way to exclude Jake's property from the assessment. I told him I'd think about it. He seemed relieved, thinking I was considering helping them out. What I was actually thinking about was the fact that their retirement fund was heavily invested in commercial properties that my company was about to acquire and completely restructure. This morning, the special assessment notices went out to all Oak Ridge Heights homeowners, including Jake. His was for $87,000 due within 60 days. At the same time, the press release went out announcing our company's acquisition of 3 major commercial properties in the downtown area, the same ones my parents' retirement fund is invested in. An hour ago, my phone started blowing up with notifications. Texts, calls, voicemails, all from my family. My mom saying she's having panic attacks. My dad saying we need to talk urgently. Jake calling me every name in the book, then switching to begging me to help him. I haven't responded to any of them yet. Part of me wants to let them stew a bit longer. Let them feel a fraction of the humiliation and helplessness they've made me feel for years. The other part of me is sitting here wondering if I've gone too far. If turning their financial lives upside down is an appropriate response to years of emotional abuse. If becoming the villain in their story is worth it. But then I remember Jake's smirk when he called me a failure. My mom's casual cruelty when she said they pretend I don't exist. My dad throwing money on my table like I was begging for change. I'll update again once I decide what to do next. But right now, I'm leaning toward letting them learn the hard way that actions have consequences. Final update. It's been 2 weeks since my last update and holy shit, things have been intense. Thanks for all the support on my previous posts. Reading your comments actually helped me stay firm when things got tough. After ignoring my family's calls and messages for 3 days, I finally agreed to meet them. Not because I felt bad or was ready to forgive them, but because I wanted to see them face to face when they realized exactly how badly they'd fucked up. I suggested meeting at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory. I got there early and grabbed a corner table where I could see the door. My parents arrived first, looking like they hadn't slept in days. My mom's eyes were puffy from crying, and my dad had this defeated slump to his shoulders I'd never seen before. Then Jake walked in 5 minutes later. He looked pissed, not scared or sorry like my parents. The second he sat down, he started in on me, asking what the hell my problem was and if I was happy now that I'd ruined his life. I just looked at him and asked if he was seriously playing the victim right now. Reminded him that he started this by humiliating me in front of an entire restaurant and my co-workers. That he's the one who told a stranger I was such an embarrassment they tell people I'm in prison. He tried to brush it off as a joke that I was taking too seriously. Said I was being petty and vindictive over some harmless family teasing. My dad jumped in saying, while Jake might have been out of line, my response was disproportionate and cruel. I pulled out my phone and played an audio recording I had from when I was 17. It was my dad telling me I should accept that Jake was the one with potential and I should focus on supporting him instead of competing with him, that I'd always be average at best and should make peace with that. My dad went white. He asked where I got that recording. I told him I started recording their put-downs when I was 16 because they'd gaslight me later, claiming they never said those things. That I have years of recordings of them tearing me down, comparing me to Jake, telling me I was a disappointment. My mom started crying, saying they were just trying to be realistic with me, that they didn't want me to get my hopes up and be disappointed when I couldn't achieve what Jake could, that it came from a place of love. I laughed in her face, asked, "What kind of love makes you tell your kid they're a failure? What kind of love makes you take down their photos and pretend they don't exist?" Jake tried to steer the conversation back to his problems. The special assessment on his second house that he can't afford. The fact that his bosses now know he lied about being an only child. How he's worried about his position at the firm. I told him I didn't give a fuck about his problems. That maybe he should ask our parents for help since he's their only son and all. My dad cleared his throat and said they couldn't help Jake because they were having their own financial issues. The commercial properties their retirement fund was invested in were being restructured, and they were looking at significant losses. He looked at me with this pleading expression and asked if there was anything I could do to help them. I asked why I would help people who've spent my entire life treating me like garbage. My mom started in with some shit about blood being thicker than water and family sticking together in tough times. I pulled out my wallet and tossed $70 on the table. Told my dad that maybe he should finally do something with his life. The look on his face when his own words came back at him was fucking priceless. He stood up so fast his chair fell backward. Started yelling that I had no right to speak to him that way, that I was being cruel and childish. People in the coffee shop were staring. The barista looked like she was about to call someone. I stayed completely calm and told him to sit down or leave, that I wasn't the one making a scene. He sat down red-faced and shaking. My mom tried a different approach, saying she was sorry if their parenting made me feel less valued, that they always wanted what was best for me, that they were proud of my success. I asked why they were proud now when they'd spent years being embarrassed by me. Was it just because I had money now? Because I could help them with their financial problems? Where was this pride when I was working construction? When I got my license? When I bought my first house? Jake jumped in saying we needed to stop dwelling on the past and figure out solutions, that he was willing to apologize if that's what I wanted. But he needed help with the assessment or he'd lose his house. I told him there were 3 options. Pay the $87,000 assessment. Sell the house back to my company at a loss. Let the house go into foreclosure. He asked if I could make an exception for him. I said, no, business is business. My dad slammed his hand on the table and asked what kind of son does this to his family. I told him I learned from the best from parents who taught their son it was okay to treat people like shit if they didn't meet your expectations. My mom started sobbing, saying this wasn't the boy they raised. I told her she was right. I wasn't the boy they raised anymore. I was the man who survived their constant criticism and emotional abuse. Who succeeded despite them, not because of them. Jake tried one more angle, saying he knew some things about my business partner Mitch that could cause problems if they got out. That maybe we could help each other. I just laughed and called Mitch right there on speakerphone. Told him Jake was threatening to spread rumors about him if I didn't help with the assessment. Mitch asked if Jake realized that blackmail is a crime, that we have lawyers for this kind of thing. Jake went pale and started backpedaling, saying he was just desperate and didn't mean it as a threat. Mitch said he understood, but suggested Jake should think very carefully about his next move. Then he hung up. The table was silent for a long minute. Then my dad asked very quietly what I wanted from them. If this was all about revenge, or if there was something they could do to make things right. I told them I didn't want anything from them. That I'd spent years trying to earn their approval and respect. And now I didn't care if I had it or not. That the assessment on Jake's house was happening regardless, and their retirement fund was going to take a hit because that's just how the market works sometimes. But I also said I wasn't going out of my way to ruin them. That these were business decisions that made sense regardless of our personal history. That Jake's house being in that development was a coincidence. I'd been looking at acquiring it for months before the restaurant incident. My mom asked if this meant I was cutting them off completely. I said I hadn't decided yet, that I'd spent 28 years being their son and gotten nothing but criticism and humiliation in return. That maybe it was time to see what life was like without them in it. Jake started getting angry again, saying I was being dramatic and acting like they'd abused me or something, that every family has issues and I was blowing things out of proportion. I stood up and told him I was done with this conversation, that Jake could figure out his housing situation on his own, that my parents could reach out again when they were ready to acknowledge how they'd treated me and offer a genuine apology, not one motivated by financial need. My dad asked one more time if I was really going to walk away from my family over hurt feelings. I told him I wasn't walking away. I was finally standing up for myself. Then I left. Over the next week, the fallout continued. Jake ended up selling his second house back to my company at a loss. He couldn't afford the assessment and couldn't get another loan to cover it. My parents had to delay their retirement by 5 years because of the hit to their investments. Jake's bosses at Westlake found out about his attempt to blackmail Mitch and put him on probation. His girlfriend, the one from the restaurant, broke up with him after hearing the full story from a mutual friend who was at the charity dinner. My mom has been sending me these long emotional texts about how much she misses me and how sorry she is for any pain they caused me. My dad hasn't reached out again. Yesterday, I ran into my mom's sister, my Aunt Karen, at the grocery store. She asked what was going on with the family. Said my mom had been crying on the phone to her, but wouldn't explain why. I gave her the short version. She looked surprised but not shocked. She told me something I never knew. Apparently Jake struggled a lot in elementary school. Had learning difficulties, needed tutoring, the whole thing. My parents spent thousands on specialists and private help. Meanwhile, I was doing fine on my own, getting good grades without any extra attention. She said they got so used to pouring all their resources and concern into Jake that when he finally started succeeding, they almost resented me for not needing their help. That their favoritism came from a twisted place of viewing struggle as deserving more love than independence. It doesn't excuse anything they did, but it helped me understand a little better how people can convince themselves they're doing the right thing while causing so much damage. I've been thinking about what happens next. I'm not interested in reconciliation, at least not now. The damage they've done over decades can't be fixed with a few apologies or some family therapy sessions. But I'm also not interested in continuing to actively punish them. I've made my point. They've faced consequences. Now I want to focus on my own life. I sold my stake in the Riverside development last week, not because of Jake, but because it was a good business move. The restaurant where I work part-time asked if I'd be interested in investing as a silent partner, and I'm considering it. As for my family, I'm going to let that relationship sit for a while. Maybe in a few months or years, we can try again with new boundaries and expectations. Or maybe we can't. Either way, I'm done trying to earn the approval of people who decided I wasn't worth it before I even had a chance to prove myself. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you deserve. And sometimes standing up for yourself means being willing to walk away. Thanks for following this crazy journey. Your comments and support have meant more than you know.